May 21, 2025. The White House. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa sits across from Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Before the meeting even begins, Trump unloads. The South African government is promoting a white genocide. White farmers are being slaughtered. Cameras flash. The phrase is intentional, explosive, calculated. Trump plays a video. Political rallies in South Africa. The chant, "Shoot the Boer." Images of white crosses in a field. But the footage isn't all real. One of the photos is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It has nothing to do with South Africa. Still, it plays on loop. The message, white genocide. But Ramaphosa doesn't let it slide. He doesn't ignore it. He responds calmly, but firmly. He says the chant is historical, tied to South Africa's fight against apartheid, not a call for violence. He reminds Trump that most victims of violent crime in South Africa are Black, and he rejects the claim of genocide. Directly, publicly. Then, with the tension still in the room, he proposes a trade deal. Liquefied natural gas, vehicle exports, aluminum quotas. To the cameras, it's diplomacy. But beneath the surface, it's a power game. Trump weaponized a conspiracy. Ramaphosa answered with facts and a counteroffer. But this wasn't the first time the white genocide narrative made headlines, nor the first time it twisted a country's pain into global propaganda. Two books took opposite sides of that battlefield. One framed farm attacks as proof of racial extermination, the other as a politically useful myth. This video opens both, so you can confront what you believe with what someone else believes just as fiercely. The first book is titled Kill the Boer, written by Ernst Roetz, a white Afrikaner and vice president of the civil rights group AfriForum. It was published in 2018, just as the phrase white genocide was gaining traction in right-wing media across the West. For Roetz, farm murders in South Africa aren't just criminal acts. They are symptoms of a national betrayal. The book is both political and emotional. It claims the ruling ANC has enabled, ignored, and even encouraged violence against white farmers. Roetz assembles crime statistics, testimonies, and historical grievances into a narrative of existential threat. He doesn't shy away from invoking genocide, even though legal experts and international observers reject that classification. But Kill the Boer isn't just a cry for help. It's a provocation. The title itself is the name of an anti-apartheid struggle song, and Roetz reclaims it as proof that racial hatred didn't end with apartheid. It simply changed targets. His thesis is clear. Farm murders are racially motivated, politically ignored, and part of a systemic campaign to dismantle the last vestiges of Afrikaner heritage. Now, contrast that with Farm Killings in South Africa by Nkama Brody, also published in 2018, also focused on the same blood-soaked fields. But this book moves in the opposite direction. Brody is a journalist and academic. Her method is forensic. Her tone, restrained. Her conclusion, farm attacks are real, brutal, and tragic, but not unique, not racially selective, and certainly not genocide. Brody goes deep into crime data. She examines rural violence broadly, revealing that Black farm workers are also frequent victims and that rural crime has complex roots: poverty, geography, delayed police response. She accuses the genocide narrative of distorting the public's view and fueling international hysteria. For her, the myth is more dangerous than the crimes. These two books don't just disagree, they attack each other's foundations. One accuses the state of racial neglect. The other accuses the accusers of manipulating grief. If Roetz paints white farmers as targets of hate, Brody paints the myth itself as the weapon. What you're about to see is not just a comparison, it's a collision. In Kill the Boer, the danger isn't just violence, it's symbolism. Roetz doesn't just count bodies, he counts slogans, songs, silence. He draws a straight line from the chants of "Kill the Boer" to political complacency and from there to bloodshed. For him, every public denial of white genocide is not just a mistake, it's complicity. One of his most cited arguments is the claim that hate crimes against white farmers are underreported and politically inconvenient. He accuses the South African Human Rights Commission of double standards. He shows gruesome crime scene photos, lists names, quotes grieving families, and above all, he insists, this is not just crime, it's ideological warfare. But farm killings in South Africa dismantles that very foundation. Brody argues that the term farm murder is a constructed category, selectively applied and emotionally charged. She questions the reliability of the data Roets uses, showing how the numbers shift depending on definitions. She accuses AfriForum of inflating statistics and ignoring broader rural violence. Her book highlights cases where farm workers, often black, were tortured or killed alongside farm owners, but were omitted from advocacy campaigns. She argues that the white genocide narrative erases black pain while appropriating the language of victimhood. The most dangerous moment in both books is when each author stops arguing and starts framing the other side as morally illegitimate. Roets implies that critics are apologists for violence. Brody suggests that Roets and his allies are manufacturing panic for political gain. In the end, it's not a debate, it's a siege. And that's what makes this clash so radioactive. It's not just about crime. It's about identity, memory, and power. Two authors, two South Africas, two truths that cancel each other out. And for everyone watching from the outside, the question isn't who's right. The question is, whose version are you ready to believe? Kill the Boer didn't stay in South Africa. It became a tool, a symbol, a resource for international campaigns accusing the ANC of orchestrating the ethnic cleansing of whites. In the United States, far-right commentators cited the book as proof that multiculturalism ends in blood. In Australia, politicians invoked it to justify restrictive immigration laws. The phrase white genocide exploded across forums, headlines, and YouTube thumbnails. But no word traveled faster or deeper than the chant at the heart of it all, Shoot the Boer, a liberation song from the apartheid era, rebranded as evidence of genocidal intent. And yet, this international fury rarely paused to verify. Inflammatory footage was clipped out of context. Crime stats were misquoted. Some viral videos showed crosses in fields that weren't even in South Africa. The outrage was real, but the foundation shaky. Nikema Brody warned about this. In her book, she described how farm murder narratives were weaponized to shape foreign policy, generate donor sympathy, and even recruit for extremist movements. Her research showed how fear travels faster than nuance and how mythology wins the algorithm. But in 2025, the war of words reached its peak. When Donald Trump sat face-to-face with Cyril Ramaphosa and declared, "Your government is committing white genocide," it wasn't a tweet. It wasn't a blog post. It was a statement made in the Oval Office, with journalists present, cameras recording, and Ramaphosa answered, not with rage, but with facts. He rejected the label of genocide. He exposed the false imagery. He reframed the chant as historical, not homicidal. And then he did something no one expected. He offered a trade deal. The headlines focused on Trump's accusation. But the real story was deeper. It was the moment when two realities, one built on fear, the other on fact, collided in full view of the world. And neither side blinked. What happens when grief becomes a brand? When trauma turns into a headline and death becomes a tool to win arguments? That's the uncomfortable question behind both Kill the Boer and farm killings in South Africa. One book asks to be believed, the other to be doubted. But both, in their own way, ask to be feared. Roets builds a fortress of evidence, photographs, testimonies, statistics, not just to report violence, but to prove that his people are under siege. Brody dismantles the same fortress brick by brick, not to deny pain, but to reclaim truth from the grip of political panic. Each book is a mirror. What you see depends on where you stand. And maybe that's the real danger. That our moral compass now orients itself around outrage, not empathy. Around proof that reinforces us, not truth that challenges us. These books don't just argue about South Africa. They argue about what kind of world we want to live in. Kill the Boer reveals a longing for order, for justice, for protection, even if that longing rides on fear and exclusion. Farm Killings in South Africa reveals a hunger for clarity, for balance, for narrative control, even if that hunger dulls the edge of raw pain. In the end, both books are incomplete, because no story is complete when it leaves half its characters silent. And maybe that's the lesson, that any narrative built on silence, whether it's the silence of Black victims or the silence of white fear, is a story missing its spine. In the Oval Office, Trump didn't just accuse. He performed. Ramaphosa didn't just respond. He endured. And in that moment, two worldviews, one forged in fear, the other in denial, stared each other down without blinking. But outside that room, the rest of us are still choosing sides, still sharing headlines, still posting slogans that simplify tragedies no one dares to study, because that's what outrage demands: speed, certainty, and someone to blame. So now you've seen both books, both battles, both versions of the same open wound. The only question that matters is this: which story did you want to believe before the facts ever entered the room?